Hey everybody, it's Gina here from Gina Makes It. Today I am on the Graphics Fairies YouTube channel with another Tag Team Friday video. In today's video, I am creating a very whimsical clock on top of a handwritten tag. So the first thing I did was print out this clock image from the horologist themed bundle that was released a couple weeks ago. And it is a beautiful clock that is set within a beautiful floral frame. However, all I wanted was the clock face because I had this idea that I was going to take some dried flowers that I recently took out of my flower press and use them on top of the clock face. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I cut out just the clock face image. I had printed this on some photo mat paper. I like to use photo mat paper when I'm printing pretty much anything that's a digital download or from the internet that's a high resolution image because it creates a very deep, rich image. I had some dried flowers that I pulled out of my press that I actually forgot about. I was going to dry some daffodils and I realized I had these little zinnias that were still in there from last year. And so I loved these little orange ones and I thought that they would be the perfect little hands on top of this clock face. So you can see that I carefully glued them down. If you work with dried flowers, which I do all of the time, you'll know that they are very brittle, as you can see here, and they are very delicate. And so I find that using these tweezers helps out a lot. So what I'm doing here is pretty fidgety and fussy, and you definitely do not have to do this, but I did it just because this is what sort of makes me when I'm working in my craft room. I'm not afraid to lift things up after they have been glued down if I'm not happy with them. And so what my idea was that this little peg in the middle, which was in the middle of the clock, was going to serve as the center, and I'm trying to center my flowers right in direct crosshairs of that little brad that's in the middle. So I measured the middle part of my face. I used my awl to create a hole in the middle. I put my brad in, and now I'm just moving around my flowers. And I had glued them down to begin with just so I knew where I wanted them, but you could see that I'm kind of pulling them up and gluing them down again very carefully, and you can't even tell that I had lifted them up and moved them again. So now that I got them exactly where I want them to be, it's time to create the tag portion of this project. So I thought that this face would sit just perfectly on this little doily that I have in my stash, and it does, and just the little scalped edges peek out from around the edge, and I just love the way that it looks. It looks so dainty and sweet. And so I just used some glue and I glue down the clock face on top of that doily. So I had this piece of paper that I printed off from the Graphics Fairies website, and it's just a handwritten note paper, and I did a little bit of embossing with some texture paste on top of it. I have a how-to video on how I did that on my YouTube channel. In case you're interested, you can head on over there and you'll find that video. I decided that this would create the perfect back to my tag. So I'm just gluing the side over to create a nice folded crease, but I needed something on the back that would provide a little bit more stability than just this piece of textured paper that I used to print it on. So for this, I know I was talking paper earlier. For this particular piece, I used a piece of cotton linen paper to create a little bit more of a faded texture look versus the photo mat paper. So I just have a piece of brown craft cardstock that I'm going to glue to the back of it. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm doing this for stability and also in case I want to do a little bit of journaling on the back at some point. I'm not sure where I'm going to use this tag, but I always like to make sure that I have plenty of journaling space just in case I want to do any journaling. So once I get that glued down, I'm going to trim off this white edge that is hanging over the side. And then I am going to add a little bit of twine to the top of my clock. Now, I wanted this clock originally to look like a little stopwatch or a little pocket watch, like from the Victorian era. But as I was putting this together at first, I thought that maybe it was a little too bulky to put underneath the clock, and so you can see it's on the upper left hand corner here, but I end up moving that in just a minute. So I find a sentiment that I want to add to the bottom, and these are just some Tim Holtz stickers that I have in my stash, And this says, for this moment, and I thought that was a nice sentiment to add to that. And so I decide to pull up that piece of twine that I had in the upper left-hand corner and add it where I originally wanted it, because it wasn't too bulky at all. I don't know what I was talking about. So it does look like a little pocket watch, and that was always my intent. And once I do that, I realize that the width of this tag and the height is a little bit too wide and a little bit too high for the look that I'm going for. And so I just take my scissors and I start trimming, and I don't do a lot at first. I do a little bit at a time, and you can see that I'm trying to make it so the clock is off to the right a little bit more than it is to the left, but so that it still comes pretty close to that left-hand side. And so then I also take my scissors. You can see I'm trying to figure out where I want to cut it, and I just pull off that piece of coffee dyed masking tape. I trim the top of it, and I add that coffee dyed masking tape back, and you can see it is much more balanced. You can see that textured paste coming through, and it is just a beautiful whimsical clock tag. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.